Hey everyone and welcome back. In today's video we will be discussing about the split brain problem and the necessity of a right quorum. Now let's go ahead and understand split brain problem with an example. So let's say that you have a cluster where there are two web servers which are currently up within the cluster. Now among this, one among them is a master. So the green web server here, this is the master and the blue one is the slave. Now you have a centralized disk over here and master node is responsible for storing and accessing some of the files from this centralized disk. So since the VM2, the web server running under the VM2 is the master one, its responsibility is to connect to the centralized storage and perform certain operations here. Now let's assume that due to some reason the connectivity between the web server 1 and the web server 2 has stopped. So the network is unreachable. However, both the web servers are up and running. However, they are not able to intercommunicate between each other. So now what will happen is the passive web server on the left hand side, this web server will assume that the web server which is in the VM2, so this web server has certain issues. So the web server in the VM1 will assume that the other web server has went down and now it will promote itself to master and then it will connect to the centralized storage here. Now the problem that happened is both of them are master, they are not able to communicate with each other and both of them are trying to connect and perform certain operations on the centralized storage. And if both of them are doing that, the chances of data corruptions are extremely high and this is dangerous. So this kind of a problem is referred as the split brain problem. Now in order for us to go away with the split brain, there is a concept of quorum. So having a right quorum is extremely important. So quorum is nothing but how many servers you have within a cluster. So currently you see there are only two servers within the cluster and due to this you have a split brain problem. But if you have a quorum of 3, so quorum of 3 means there are going to be 3 members which are going to be part of the cluster. So having a correct quorum will help you prevent the split brain problem. So let's understand this with the example here. Now in this type of architecture there are 3 members within the cluster and as expected the web server running in the VM1 is the master one and the other ones are the passive ones, or I would say the child ones. Now here everything is working correctly, all of them are able to intercommunicate correctly and the master one has taken the lead and it is writing to the centralized storage. Now in the quorum type of architecture, voting is extremely important. So let's say that each of the server which is participating within the cluster has a vote. So you have VM1, so a web server here has vote 1. You have one more vote for the VM2 and you have one more vote for the VM3. So each and every server which is participating in the quorum has its own vote. Now let's assume that the web server which is currently the master in the VM1 has the connectivity issue. So this specific server is not able to communicate with the VM2 as well as VM3. Now in such cases what will happen is this web server will determine how many votes it has. So currently since this server is not able to communicate to the VM2 nor it is able to communicate with the VM3. So it only has vote 1 and hence it will lose. However, you have the VM2 and VM3's connectivity working perfectly. So both of them has higher vote because VM2 has vote 1, VM3 has vote 2. So in total, both of them has in total 2 votes. So VM2 1 vote, VM3 has 1 vote, so total 2 votes. So then this will win, the right hand side part will win, and thus since the VM1 has only 1 vote, it will remove its connectivity from the centralized storage here and the VM3. So there will be a algorithm which will choose a new master between these two. So let's say that the VM3 has been chosen as the master. So now this master will go ahead and connect to the centralized storage. So this is the reason why having the right quorum is extremely important. Now, once the connectivity between VM1 to the other VMs has been established, again, we already know because of 2 votes, the VM3 had taken the role of master. So then the VM1 would step down and it would act as a passive node. Now, do remember that in this type of architecture, in this type of quorum where there are 3 cluster nodes, you can have a failure of up to only 1. Because let's say, because we already discussed that if there was a failure of 1, the other 2 has the vote of 2. And this is the reason why they were able to choose the master. Now in the quorum of 3, if 2 server went down, then again it is going to be the same issue. So you have to make sure that the quorum is always the right one. So few important parts to remember for the quorum. First one is that you should always maintain an odd number of the nodes within the cluster. So this can be understood with the diagram here. So let's understand this table. So here you have a cluster size of 1. Now since you have 1, you have majority of 0 and fault tolerance of 0. So that means if this server goes down, then the cluster goes away. Now you also have a cluster size of 2 where you need a majority of 2. And there cannot be a fault tolerance here because we already took an example of a split brain in a typical scenario of 2 servers here. So if one server, due to some reason, there is a network connectivity issue between both of these servers, then that can create an issue. Now for the example of cluster size of 3, you need the majority of 2 and you can have one server down at a moment of time. This also we understood here, that if there are 3 servers here and if one server is not able to connect to the other 2, then the other 2 can take the majority because they have the vote of 2 over here. And this specific server has only 1 vote, and this is the reason why it can disconnect itself to the centralized storage. So for the quorum of 3, for the cluster size of 3, the majority of 2 servers are needed all the time. And this is what we can see over here. The majority of 2 servers are needed at all the time, and up to 1 server failure can be sustained. And same goes for 4, 5, 6 and 7. So always remember, you should have an odd number whenever you are creating a cluster. So that's the high level overview about the split brain and also about the quorum. So with this, we'll conclude this video. I hope this video has been informative for you and I look forward to see you in the next video.